This is Histories and Mysteries. I'm one of your hosts, Ashley, and this is
Jessica, and on today's episode, Ashley is going to be talking about the case of Natalia Grace, and I'm going to be starting my part 1 series on Jonestown, which is one of my favorite stories.
Yay. I thought you were going to say one of your favorite cults, and I was like, do you
Well,
truly have favorite cults?
It's just so fascinating. I
think... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think if I had to pick a favorite cult, it would probably be Jonestown.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Like, it's horrendous what happened.
Awful.
But,
awful.
like, it is everything behind it is just so cool. Like, I'm basically, I wrote a paper 3 years ago for college, and I got 100% on this paper, and I'm basically just going to read it to you. Because obviously my professor knew what was up, so.
Right?
And
well, I
it's
feel like it's... I just feel like it's like the cultiest cult. Like it checks all the cult boxes, you know?
Yeah, it really is. And it's just a wild, wild ride. So,
well, mine is also a wild ride.
Perfect.
If you haven't heard of it, which have you ever heard of Natalia Grace?
I don't think so.
Okay, then this is going to be great.
Perfect.
It's not super long because there's just not a lot to the case, but you're in for a wild ride, so buckle on up.
Perfect.
All right, so I'm going to get into it. I used this amazing article from Daily Mail, the BBC, and the Journal and Courier article by Ron Wilkins.
Cool.
All right, so Christine and Michael Barnett have 3 children. One is Jacob Barnett, who is apparently like a physics genius. He's like 15 at the time of all this. He was like 15, a genius in physics, like high IQ. She even wrote a book about him called like Spark something. It was like Spark : something.
Okay.
So they gained a little bit of fame from that back in 2010.
Oh, this is recent then.
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Okay.
That same year, their family, they had fostered several children, and they also, the mom ran a daycare. So they really wanted a big family, and she even mentioned that like they were pretty well off, privileged at the time, so they wanted to be able to help children who were maybe not as necessarily as privileged. So they got a phone call from an agency in Florida that needed an emergency adoption. It was like an emergency adoption for a 6-year-old named Natalia Grace. She came from the Ukraine when she was about 2, and she had a rare bone growth disorder. Okay, so this word has like 100,000 letters in it. I'm gonna try and say it just the way I was gonna look up how to pronounce it, but you know what? Let's just go for it.
Perfect.
Okay. Spondylopometaphysal dysplasia.
Cool.
I don't know. I know I said dysplasia, right?
Sounded mostly okay.
It's a form of dwarfism. Mm-hmm. And her bones just don't grow the correct way. It causes them to have a hard time walking and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So she had been in the U.S. at this point for about 2 years. So she came over here when she was about 4. And because she came over here by adoption, and her previously adopted family gave her up, and the article said for undisclosed reasons.
Okay, of course.
But this family, the Barnetts, they knew she had the bone disorder, and they didn't mind taking care of a special needs child. Her background, the mom's background, was actually in special needs. So they were totally okay with it. They welcomed her into their own home, or into their home as their own child. They even took all of them to Disney World while they were still in Florida. to
Nice.
bond with her brothers.
Perfect. I like that.
Yeah. That's until 2013, when at the age of 10, they put her up in her own apartment in Indiana and moved to Canada, leaving her all alone
What? At 10?
at 10.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Okay. So,
Okay.
so they said and now granted, most of this article is their perspective. There's not a lot on her perspective. I know that after some time they did place a gag order on all of them, so they couldn't talk about it. And she was on Dr. Phil, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too.
Ooh.
Yes. But they said that after they adopted her, right away they started seeing some red flags. So they said at first she was extremely shy, and because of her disability, she had a hard time walking. And when they went to the beach, the three boys kind of took off into the ocean like kids do, and she can't. So she asked Michael to carry her into the ocean. He's like, yeah, just give me a minute. I guess he was pretty tired. I don't know, lugging all the stuff. I'm not sure. Well, she then got up and ran in herself.
Oh.
Yeah. So they were shocked. They said, how did she run into the ocean when she could barely walk? They also started noticing different things about her. So the mom said that she had found some bloody pads and stuff that it looked like she was trying to hide. So she thought that she had her period and she was trying to hide it.
Mm.
She also said that when she was giving her a bath, she saw that she had pubic hair already.
Oh.
They said that she never grew at all, which even a child with her disorder should grow a little bit.
Yeah.
And this is kind of stupid. They said that she didn't want to play with dolls or toys, preferred the company of teenage girls, which, what little girl doesn't think teenage girls are the coolest thing in the world?
Yeah.
And she said that she had a very sophisticated vocabulary.
Is she an adult?
Maybe.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
She also said that at the time she was running a daycare, and Natalia said, these children are exhausting. I don't know how you do it.
Oh my goodness.
So after all of this, Christine finally took Natalia to the family doctor to have a bone density test, which I don't really know what that is, but and
See how
he
dense your
confirmed.
bones are.
Yeah, but I don't get how that corresponds to age. But I mean, I
I
guess the older you are, the more dense they are.
Yeah, and I think it also has to do with her condition as well, right? So
Yeah, probably.
yeah.
And he said that she was at least 14 years old based on his tests.
Oh.
And she was supposed to be 6.
But her comments seem even older than 14.
Yeah.
That's weird. Okay.
So Christine said that she changed her outfits after that to more age appropriate items because she was dressing her up like a little girl.
Yeah.
She liked princess dresses and stuff like that. So she seemed like she was maybe okay with it. But she said this is where her behavior took a turn for the worst. At one point on a monitor that she had, for the daycare, she saw Natalia attacking a baby.
Nice.
And tried to take her to therapy, but Natalia, quote, scoffed at the childish bonding exercises. She then began to smear bodily fluids on the walls.
Ew.
She started hearing voices and threatening the family.
Okay.
She said that Natalia would put chemicals in her coffee, such as Windex and bleach. And when confronted, she would say, yeah, I'm trying to poison you.
Oh, okay.
She said that Natalia would also stand over people as they slept.
Oh, it's Robert Dahl.
And finally, she tried to pull Christine into an electric fence in 2012.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So at this point, she had already had several stays in psychiatric hospitals. After she tried to pull Christine into an electric fence, she finally was admitted to a long-term state-run psychiatric unit.
Okay.
So during this stay, Christine says that Natalia confessed to being much older than she claimed, and at one point she said she was 18.
Ew.
And Christine has papers and documents from the hospital to back up this part of the story.
Mm-mm.
In another hospital in June of 2012, staff said that Natalia bragged about trying to kill the family and described it as, quote, fun.
Oh, okay. Like, when you started this story, I thought the bad guys were the family, and now the tides are turning.
Well,
The turning of the
hold that
tides.
thought.
Oh,
Hold
okay,
that thought.
JK.
So the family doctor that had originally seen her for those bone density tests penned a letter in March 2012 that stated Natalia's 2003 birth date was inaccurate and that Natalia had made a career out of pretending to be a young child.
Ew.
Have you ever seen the movie Orphan or The Orphan?
No.
It's a scary movie and it's like very loosely based on this because she's um an adult that looks like a child and like goes in with his family and tries to murder them.
Okay, it's like that creepy movie poster. She has like black hair and like pigtails.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Like old
Yeah, it's
timey
based on
Victorian clothes.
it's
Okay.
based on this.
Okay, cool.
So around the same time when that doctor penned the letter, the police became involved and sent the case over to the FBI and ICE because they believed that age fraud had taken place before Natalia had even left the Ukraine.
Yeah.
They believed that she lied about her age
Okay.
before she was adopted. But the FBI didn't take it any further, so
Why?
they kind of left it at that. They didn't say because the guy who had originally taken the case died. And so there's another guy that's like, yeah, I vaguely remember that case, but we didn't take it any further. So,
Awesome. Okay.
uh, in June of 2012, the Barnetts petitioned the courts to legally change Natalia's birth year from 2003 to 1989, making her
Ooh,
22 instead of
yeah.
8,
Jeez.
so that she could receive mental health care as an adult,
Okay.
is what they said.
Okay.
And so the courts granted that. So they must have had enough evidence for the courts to believe them. And after Natalia was released from the psychiatric hospital, they rented her apartment to live in, helped her to obtain a social security card, apply for benefits, etc. But Natalia was kicked out of that apartment. They don't say why. And so the Barnetts found her another apartment. Christine said that she spoke to Natalia daily. She co-signed her lease, paid for a year of rent, and even bought her furniture for her new home.
Wow.
But this is the point where they decided to move to Canada because there was this specific college that their genius son needed to go to. So they left Natalia on her own, but like they had set her up. And at this point, Natalia vanished and stopped returning Christine's phone calls.
Oh.
Come to find out, another family had taken her in.
Oh.
So that was all from Christine and Michael. So what's Natalia's side of the story?
I don't know.
Well, her attorney says that a doctor at the Peyton Manning Children's Hospital
Nice.
carried out a different bone density test in 2010
Okay.
and found her to be the age of 8 at the time. And then another skeletal test conducted in 2012 found her to be around the age of 11, which is what she was claiming.
Okay.
She claims that she was not an adult and she was indeed adopted at the age of 6. And she was on Dr. Phil and talked about her story. And she said that her previous family gave her back because she hurt one of the children. She said she was close to one of the sons and they would like wrestle and play, and she landed on his arm wrong. And the mom thought she was trying to break his arm, so she like gave her back.
Probably because of all of her other psychotic behavior.
Yeah. So I'm like, that story sounds a little fishy.
Yeah.
But there are, awful people out there, but she also claimed that the poisoning claims were a misunderstanding while cleaning with Christine, and that she only went into their bedroom at night if she had a nightmare.
Okay.
The court affidavit states that Natalia was the one who told the police in 2014 that she had been abandoned. In 2014, at the same time when this was kind of hitting the news, the Barnetts actually went through a divorce, and Michael eventually remarried and moved back to Indiana, where he was then charged for neglect almost 5 years later.
Oh,
and I don't know if they didn't have enough evidence or if it was because he was in Canada at the time. They had to wait till he came back. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, a lot of usually it depends. Like I know with Ontario warrants, they have like a certain radius. Sometimes their their return radius is shorter. Sometimes it's province wide, or so
Mm-hmm.
it might only have been for Indiana. I don't know.
Gotcha.
But I know that there are sometimes like limitations to how far a warrant can go for somebody.
Okay. All right. So the court affidavit also stated that Michael Barnett admitted that Christine told Natalia to tell other people that she looks young, but she was actually 22. It goes on to say that he knew all along that Natalia was a minor child when she was allegedly abandoned. Michael's attorney says that this is all false. He states that Michael spoke with police for 3 hours without an attorney present, and that they took his statements out of context.
Of course they did.
Of course. He also states that the affidavit is very selective in its medical records that it's choosing to use. So in 2016, Natalia was back in the courts because another couple wanted her birth year changed, like overturned and changed back to 2003 so that they could take her under her guardianship. The judge looked at several medical records and heard from several witnesses and ultimately decided to uphold her age as being 22.
Okay.
And Christine made a really good point. She said, I'm being charged by the state of Indiana for crimes against a child when the state of Indiana has determined multiple times that Natalia is an adult.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Michael was on Dr. Oz. His family's just all over the place. And said that he doubts she's even Ukrainian. He said she had no accent, couldn't speak the language, and had no memory of growing up in the Ukraine.
That doesn't mean you're not Ukraine. Okay.
So Christine and Michael had been arrested and charged with 2 counts of felony child neglect. Both posted bail fairly quickly. And this past fall, all charges were dropped against Christine based on the fact that, according to Superior Court, Natalia is an adult.
Okay, perfect.
But Michael still needed to file for this dismissal. And so before I...
What are you doing?
I'm thinking how I said before I tell this little twist, what are you thinking right now? Do you think she's an adult or do you think she's a kid?
I honestly, based off of her behavior and her word choices, I would say she's more of an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And just based off the other sketchy stuff, she booked it into the ocean even though she wasn't supposed to be able to walk very well, and I was just play wrestling my brother and I broke his arm.
Yeah.
So I would say older, but I don't know.
Well, that's what I thought too, until
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, so August 27th of this year, so 2 months ago.
Okay.
Well, what, 3 months ago?
Yeah. I don't know anymore. I don't
4
know
months
what day
ago.
it is.
Who even knows what this year is?
I don't even know what day it is. Honestly.
the prosecutors found her birth mother in the Ukraine,
Oh.
and they tested the DNA to confirm that she is, in fact, the birth mother. And she gave birth to a daughter with the same disorder that Natalia has, that she gave up for adoption in 2003.
Wow.
But since her age was already settled in court, they can't go after the Barnetts based on her age. But they can go after them for neglect based on her disability.
Okay.
So the next step, which hasn't happened yet because this is all ongoing,
Yeah.
is that they will take it to a higher court to determine if the charges can be dismissed. Like if he says, well, this judge saw all the evidence and said that she's 22, or if they can move forward with their case. And so right now they're awaiting that trial, and if you are to believe the Barnetts, Natalia is now 30. If you are to believe Natalia, she just had her 17th birthday, and she is right now living with another family who do believe her to be 17.
Wow.
And that is the story of Natalia Grace. I know that was super short, but I
Okay.
started reading about it and I was like, this is crazy. I have to do it. There's just not a lot on it because obviously it's still ongoing, but
Yeah.
it's just crazy.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
no, that was a good story. I'd never heard that before. So,
Yeah.
especially because it's so recent. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting, especially because that movie, The Orphan, is basically in The Orphan, she is an adult and she is trying to murder the family. This case is just a lot of he said, she said. And then it's weird that they have the like conflicting medical reports.
Mm-hmm.
But then they found her mother who said she was born in 2003. So I just don't know.
Did you ever see the show Recess?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it was from that show where there was like this kid and TJ thought that he was like a grown up and nobody believed him. And then he did end up being like an undercover cop or something. I don't know if it was from
Ooh, maybe Natalia's an undercover cop.
Maybe.
Or a spy from the Ukraine.
Maybe. That would be more likely. But yeah, I don't know. It might not be Recess, but I know I've seen an episode like that before and it was cartoon.
Yeah. I love that show Recess when I was younger.
So good.
So good.
So good. The Ashley Club.
Yeah. I was always like, ugh.
When they found out Spinelli was an Ashley.
I was like, I like Spinelli. That's a better Ashley.
And yeah, and then she ended up being an Ashley.
Yep.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. All right, I guess it's my turn.
Yeah, let's start hearing about Jonestown.
It's a wild ride. Okay, so obviously, like I said, this is my paper because it's going to be the most researched thing I put out here. Like I usually try and do my research in a couple of days just because like obviously still working and just super busy.
Yeah.
But I mean, I did this over a couple months, so.
Right, yeah.
It's extensive, but I feel like it's detailed well enough that it should be good.
Yeah.
I have way too many resources that I'm not even gonna try and like explain them all.
We'll post them in the description.
Yeah, because they're also all in like Chicago format, so like MLA format, so I don't really want to bore you all with the details. So, oh god, oh goodness gracious, sorry I didn't say that. Sorry, mother. I mean, my husband set me up in his closet because for some reason he got the bigger closet. I think it's because of my OCD. I have to have things on like certain sides of me, so I thought it would be weird if I had a closet on the right hand side because our closets are like right beside each other. So I'm like, I have to have the one on the left. And then, so obviously he took the one on the right, but the one on the right I think is bigger. But so we
I took the bigger closet, so.
I did in our old rental. I had a massive walk-in closet. Like I literally could have set up my dining room table in that closet. It was so big. I missed
Well,
it so
Cody
much.
has, like, 5 shirts.
Yeah.
Like, he rotates through it. I have, like, 955,000,
Well,
so.
and that's the thing. It's so funny that I chose a smaller closet when I have more clothes. But it works. Like he moved a lot of his clothes that he hangs up like into his son's room and stuff. So
Mhm,
because like his son isn't here very often, like he's just here half the amount of time,
mhm,
shared custody. So and he doesn't like use his closet, right? So
mhm.
I typical Jessica fashion started this essay off with a quote.
Perfect.
Yeah, gotta tie that all in, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, body. So it starts by saying, this is just so funny. I haven't read this paper in like 3 years, so this will be a ride for all of us. Quote, you are not here merely to make a living. You are here in order to enable the world to live more amply, with greater vision, with a finer spirit of hope and achievement. You are here to enrich the world, and you impoverish yourself if you forget the errand. Unquote. That was a quote by Woodrow
Ooh.
Wilson. Woodrow Wilson?
Ooh.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Woodrow.
Woodrow.
Okay.
Yeah, Woodrow.
So I felt like I know that sounds like a weird quote for this type of story, but it actually like ties into things a little bit.
It's fancy.
Exactly. And it's all italicized too.
Oh.
So, James or Jim Warren Jones was born May 13th, 1931, and he was someone with an admirable vision, or so he and many others believed. Most
Mostly he, but yes.
mostly he. People believed him, so
Yeah, yeah. He did have a whole cult, so.
exactly. A very large one.
Yeah.
Jones had a vision of community that accepted whites and blacks alike, living together under one roof as a family. He
Which
whole
was unusual at that time, right?
exactly, yeah, because it was back in like the 60s,
Segregation and
70s. So
everything, yeah.
yeah.
Well,
He
after wait, when
I
was
don't know.
segregation? Hold on, I gotta Google this so I don't sound like an idiot.
I think it was still during a time where it wasn't like super accepted.
1964, segregation ended. So, yeah, it
Yeah,
was like right after it ended. So, people were probably still very,
exactly.
yeah.
He wholeheartedly believed that he could and would deliver his people to the promised land, and that all of them would be saved from their past transgressions if they followed his word and did not steer away from what he said. So, little God complex there.
Yeah, just a bit.
Just a wee bit. With promises of purpose, happiness, and community, he attracted many that sought fulfillment following the many atrocities the world had been experiencing during that warring time. Jones was a bold, charismatic leader, and that made those around him believe they were being called to be part of something really incredible, something great,
Mhm.
and something memorable that would have a lasting impact on the world to come. And kind of how we talked about in our cult episode, during this time frame, that's when people were looking for something more and they wanted
Mhm.
to make an impact on the world, right?
Yeah, and they were super fucked up on drugs.
Yeah. That too. That helps a bit. um, However, as consequence of the ever increasing power and control he had over those that chose to follow him, Jones spiraled down into a crippling drug addiction. There we go. Which led to a delusional paranoia. He led those who trusted and loved him further and further away from what he called the promised land, which ultimately caused the demise of 909 individuals who trusted and followed him.
It's insane. I
909 people.
Yeah, that's insane. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on this podcast, but I used to be a teacher and I taught forensics and I did a whole unit on cults and I really focused on the Jonestown cult because it's just insane to me how many people he was able to get to follow him all the way to the end.
Honestly, like, it is horrifying, and, like, obviously, I'll get more into it next week about how that whole thing went down.
Right.
So, because it's not as cut and dry as that, so
Right.
but there was, like, a huge bulk that, like, were just so devout. It was
Oh,
wild.
yeah.
It was such a
Well,
wild
it
ride.
like you said, it wasn't all that. There's definitely a mixture between forcing
Yeah,
and devout, but yeah.
exactly, yeah, but it was still wild.
Yeah, for sure.
So, we're going to get into our Jim Jones character now.
Yay.
Super messed up.
I mean, I guess I should say boo, right?
Yeah.
Boo.
Exactly, he was not a great guy.
Boo for him, yay for your research.
Yay! Super in-depth research, might I add. So, before we can begin to look at what was created, we kind of need to look at the guy that created it, just so we can,
Right.
like, better understand
Understand.
everything
For
that was
sure.
going on. So, he was actually a very lonely kid, and he was an outcast in his community. In his spare time, he would immerse himself into the world of reading to sharpen his knowledge of the world around him. He studied religion and politics and whatever else he found fascinating.
Mhm.
And this was also kind of how he escaped the world around him, and he became more and more of a loner and an outcast. So, great beginnings. I mean, it kind of reminds me of Belle from Beauty and the Beast, right? She was a reader. She liked to read, and she was a loser to her community.
Oh, no, Bella's a cult leader.
I mean, she's a little crazy. She talked to, like, furniture, so and she fell in love with a monster.
Stockholm syndrome, cult
Yeah.
leader syndrome, like, there's just so much wrong. Not that I don't love it, because I do friggin' love
No.
Beauty and the Beast, but
That's too funny. Okay, I never made that comparison before, but here we are.
oh, no, poor Belle.
Ugh, I think it's just because I was listening to the soundtrack the other day. Alright. So, Mr. Jim Jones also lived in a place where the Black community was not accepted by the white community. Here we go. And this bothered him very, very much. One out of his many readings, one author and theorist, Karl Marx, stood
Oh,
out and connected strongly with him. Jones believed in the Marxist theory, Marxism, where it is believed that the perception of class struggle plays a dominant role in understanding society's supposedly unavoidable development from middle class domination under capitalism to a socialist and ultimately classless society. In summary, and in keeping with Marx's theory, Jones had a long standing commitment to achieving racial equality.
which is so sad because it started out as such a positive
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, it's so unfortunate, but it's also so fascinating that it goes from something like that to what it became. Derived from his childhood experiences, Jones was driven to create a community where everybody was accepted and where everyone agreed to follow his teachings and theories. This was the birth of the People's Temple.
Hmm.
This church first planted its roots in Indianapolis until they had no choice but to relocate, as the state's residents were far too racist and unaccepting for the type of church that Jones envisioned. The People's Temple was then moved to the state of California. It was, and I think they did this because, like, it was a state filled with broad-minded people who were more accepting of those kinds of things
Yeah.
and of the kinds of things that Jones wanted to create. Because it was like, to me, that's like the hippie capital.
Yeah, California is generally the more, liberal leaning, so they're more open
Yeah.
to people of all kinds.
Yes.
And
Um,
I think they've always been that way.
yeah, I think it's just like their vibe, right?
Mhm.
Um, oh, it was also the best place to be in case there was a nuclear strike.
Oh.
So there we
Okay.
go.
So we start to see a little bit of the paranoia coming out.
A little bit, yes. During their time in California, the People's Temple grew exponentially. So it started opening branches all over the state. Jones continued to acquire Greyhound buses, going on state tours to recruit individuals to join his cause.
Well, and I mean, can you imagine at that time when everything is still so separate and there's still so much hatred and racism, and here's this person saying like, "Hey, here's a place where we welcome everyone,"
Yeah,
you
here's
know?
a safe place for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I hate it.
Mhm.
I hate that it ended up the way it did.
Yeah, for sure.
Scrutiny began to develop against Jones and the People's Temple, and the result of rumors being spread concerning abuse among the members. So Jones picked up his community once again and moved to a wide open piece of land in Guyana, South America. And he named the community there Jonestown because why wouldn't he name it after himself?
Of course.
They had finally arrived at the perfect destination where they could create all that Jones had promised to his followers. So it was a place where they could grow and they could work for their own food and build everything themselves.
Mhm.
Literally.
Yeah.
This was their opportunity to build a home of their own, far away from the judgments, ridicule, and condemnation that those in North America imposed upon them. Despite his promise of a better life, things actually and were like obviously took a turn for the worse
Mhm.
as when the 70s came around, Jones became more and more irrationally paranoid,
Mhm.
partaking daily in increased drug use. Because
Yeah.
why not? Uh,
Yeah, and when you already have some mental instability and
yeah,
paranoia, add drugs to that, and it is just a match made in not heaven.
exactly. Yeah, it's awful.
Mhm.
At the rate he was going, he had only a few more months left to live by the time Jonestown would be wiped off the face of the planet.
Wow.
Jones strongly believed everyone was out to get him, and this showed in his daily life, abusing those who trusted him, exhausting them, brainwashing them into submission. So
Wasn't
just,
there a lot of sexual assault going on as well?
I believe so, yes. I may or may not get into it. Like I said, I wrote this like 3 years
We'll
ago.
find out.
We'll find out. I'll find out with you. So this is just as much your ride as it is mine.
We keep it fun and spicy that way.
Exactly. Jones knew in his heart that he was a bad guy, but he went to great measures manipulating and brainwashing the community into believing that everything he did was for them, which was obviously skewing their view of him.
Do you think he really thought he was a bad guy?
Um I feel like someone that was as well read as he was, and especially somebody that believed in the Marxist theory like he did, and his initial goal was very noble.
Yeah.
I feel like eventually he did start to feel like he was a bad guy, and that may be why he was partaking in increased drug use, um,
Interesting.
and taking on that control role, right? But at the same time, I will never know.
Yeah. So
It's just
I kind of feel like he obviously had some deep rooted mental issues.
yes.
And I think that that was the cause of the increase in drug use. And then, like, obviously, especially the type of drugs he was doing, that really sucks you in.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't necessarily think he thought he was a bad guy. I think even like not comparing anyone really to Hitler, but like even Hitler thought he was doing the right thing for his
Mhm.
people,
Yeah.
and so I feel like maybe, I mean, Hitler had to know he was being evil by murdering all those people, but
Yeah.
obviously in Jonestown he hadn't murdered anyone yet.
No, and like
Um,
I think at
so
that
I don't know.
I think that maybe at the beginning he thought he was a bad guy, and then by the end, with the increased drug use, it just kind of numbed him and he didn't care anymore.
And you just kind of felt I feel like it's almost like if you're a cult leader, you feel justified in doing what you're doing
Yeah,
because you feel like the ends justify the means.
exactly, yeah. So, who knows?
Yeah. Anyway.
But I like those theories, so. Um, ultimately, quote, "Many believe that it was the inner circle who forced the final suicides for fear that Jones would soon become too insane to function."
Interesting. Okay, I had not heard that before. That's interesting.
Yeah. So, that was a different take on it, I guess, which was cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So now I'm going to talk about the People's Temple, apparently.
Apparently.
It originally was called the People's Temple Full Gospel Church.
Okay.
It, of course, began with a Marxist background in the sense that Jones wanted to
Mhm.
create equality among the members.
Mhm.
However, in the late 1960s, Jones began to preach about an impending nuclear apocalypse, steering away from his initial vision and creating a frenzied fear among the congregation.
Right.
Those that were members of the temple were drawn to the integrated Christian community, and many had a religious background stemming from their early years, so it was very easy for them to be persuaded by what Jones was preaching because they were capable of the blind devotion that Jones sought because they believed in their own religion, right? And usually with religion,
Right.
it is that blind belief.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Um, so many of the members were college educated. Some had legal and political backgrounds as well,
Mhm.
which is just, it's so crazy to think that like intelligent people, like very hardworking, intelligent people joined something like this. It is so hard for me to wrap my head
Yeah.
around it. But
Yeah. I think it's just that it started out as such a good message.
yeah,
And I think it's like one of those things where it like slowly falls apart and slowly declines, but by then you're so far into it that you're fucked, you know? There's a documentary. It's very entertaining. It came out like maybe earlier this year. I have a lot of issues with it. There's a they make the cult leader out to be just kind of like this like loony do-gooder that, you know, was just misunderstood, which he was not. But one of his like right hand men in it was very intelligent. I want to say he was in law or something along those lines. And they kind of show
yeah,
that progression, like where, you know, he started out as this like religious belief and following and how it kind of morphed into something that he wasn't prepared for and kind of how he got sucked into it slowly but surely.
yeah. It's so crazy, especially because it happens like more often than you would think. Oh, so crazy.
Mhm.
So even though there were those very intelligent, like well-educated people in this cult, there are also, of course,
Right.
other members from backgrounds of like drug and alcohol abuse and criminal activity. And
Of course.
Jones was the one that brought them all together under one common goal to make them and the world a better place. He helped them work through and move past their transgressions, of course, with the intention of helping them build for themselves a better and brighter future because he just has such a noble cause. He first opened the People's Temple in Indianapolis in the mid 1950s, as I stated. His congregation was racially integrated, something very unusual at the time for a Midwestern church.
Especially Midwestern
Yeah, and especially in the
and
mid
South.
1950s.
Yeah, because that was still during segregation.
Exactly, yeah. So he was a pioneer. He wanted the rest of the world to know what he and his church were doing, so he enjoyed giving back to the community. The church ran social and medical programs for the needy, including a free dining hall, drug rehabilitation, and legal aid services.
It started off so good.
I know. It had such a good goal in the beginning.
Yeah.
He wanted the rest of the world to know that what they were doing was good, yep, and could benefit
Mhm.
others.
For sure.
So why change? I don't know.
I think it's just that descent into mental illness, you know?
Yeah, the descent into madness and
Yeah.
alcohol and drug abuse.
Drugs. Yeah.
His preaching changed, however, and of course, and he admitted this is so funny. He admitted he was an atheist and that the only reason he preached Christianity was so that he would be able to legitimize his claims to those that would listen.
Rude.
Yeah, liar. His preaching transformed into reports that the world was ending and that it would be a nuclear ending, and that the CIA was planning to exterminate all Black people,
Okay.
which was most of his congregation. On top of all of this, Jones believed that the CIA was out to get his sons and daughters, and this paranoid way of thinking quickly shifted the way things were done. Dun, dun, dun.
Da-da-da.
When Jones made the decision to leave California for Guyana, he explained that it was for the good of the church and that this move would allow them the freedom they needed and wanted against those that disagreed with their way of living and thinking.
Well, and at this point, weren't families starting to get really suspicious and trying to like um get their family members back and trying to bring it to law enforcement and stuff?
That kind of happens like later on, but I think when they move to Guyana, that's when they're like, this is not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we'll hear about more of that later on next week's episode.
Okay. Sorry.
Um,
Jumping the gun.
no, that's okay. But it like I think like it's very common for if your family member is joining a cult, you're gonna be concerned.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
but and so like I wouldn't be surprised if it happened during the whole thing, but it does
Mhm.
culminate later on into something more. So,
Right.
yes. Yes. Unfortunately, it's a tragic
Yeah.
ending, but yes.
Yeah, I definitely know what you're talking about. But I feel like that was one of the reasons why he left was because family members were starting to kind of get together and being like, "Hey,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
don't like
I
this."
think that a lot of like family members were sending letters and stuff, and
Mhm.
at the same time, like
And kinda like
people,
protesting almost.
yeah, and people weren't very happy with the fact that he was a mixed congregation as well, right?
Yeah.
So it got a little too intense, and he's just like, we need a place of our own. So,
Yeah.
um, when they got to Guyana, though, it was anything but what he had actually promised them.
It was hard. It was rough.
Yeah. And he also became a very cruel dictator. He made them work long days with little amounts of food or sleep to replenish them. And there were also reports that women were frequently sexually abused by Jones and were forced to publicly complain about their husband's lovemaking.
Oh my.
Yeah. This made some seriously like oh sorry. This made some people question Jones's decision-making skills
Yeah.
as they could clearly see that he was developing a severe problem. And this was
Yeah.
noted especially by those who had experienced the same addiction before joining the People's Temple.
Mhm.
It's like those previous drug abuse people, right?
Mhm.
So, oh well, it is what it is. I mean, why didn't you stop him if you saw the signs? But
Yeah.
I digress. Okay, so now we have a header called Brainwashing and Abuse.
Ooh.
Okay. Despite his promise of an accepting community, a place that would make their lives better, there was a lot wrong with the way things were done in the People's Temple, of course. Like most cults, brainwashing was a tool constantly used by Jones to control his people, um, and to make them believe that he was their father and they were his children.
Mhm.
He was a very charismatic and intelligent individual, and he knew how to manipulate people into blindly following him. He would frequently perform fake healings to legitimize his claim as a prophet of the Lord. So he'd like plant people in the audience and stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, we know that type of business. When new people joined the People's Temple, Jones had many methods of initially gaining control over them. He would force them to give up all of their personal belongings, and in some extreme cases, he would even force them to sign over custody of their children by way of an
What?
affidavit saying that,
Wow.
yeah, and in these affidavits, they basically said that they did something horribly wrong to lose possession of their child.
Oh my
And
gosh.
this, of course, was used as blackmail.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that. That's awful.
Yeah. So rather than just being like, sign over your children, they also had to say, hey, we're horrible parents. Don't let us have our children back.
Wow.
Yeah. In case they tried to do something about it later. So
Yeah.
he also told his members that he was the only heterosexual male in the world and that only he could have children.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's
what?
like, what is happening? Okay. By having possession of members' children, he could control them in any way he seemed fit. He had the leverage he needed to make them do anything that he wanted because he now had their loved ones in his legal possession.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Um,
that's a pretty good motivator right there.
yeah, and like he knew he needed to separate families to gain control over
Mhm.
every single one of them. So
Right.
it's a very smart power move.
Oh, for sure.
So he was fucked, but he was smart.
Cult leaders are, man. They're so if they could only use their intelligence for good.
Yeah, I know. Like he initially wanted to.
Mhm.
Power trips, man. Get you every
Yep.
time.
Yep.
In addition to this, he made members sell their homes and give all of the money to the church. And they were
Mhm.
also required to give their paychecks to the church, and they were not allowed to keep what they earned. And because they were brainwashed to believe that Jones provided everything for them and and they owed him everything.
And this was all before they moved down to South America, correct?
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So, because they were all still working
Right.
and making money and making a living. So,
And having houses.
exactly. Everything that they needed, he had, and it was extremely hard to get unhooked from something like that.
Of course. Yeah, you have no means to do so.
Yeah. But it's like you get to that point of your brainwashing where you're like, he provides everything. It's not me giving him stuff at the beginning
Right.
and then he provides for me. It's he provides everything somehow, some way. I need to
Mhm.
trust in him. So
Right.
he would also make statements such as, I've never lied to you, but the world has, and without me, life has no meaning.
Wow.
Yeah, well,
Sounds like some of my exes, but a
yeah.
bunch.
It's true. Oh my goodness. What a crock show.
Yeah.
Um da, 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 da. They were made to believe that they were worthless without him in their lives. And he would say, I've always taken your troubles right on my shoulders, like Jesus Christ. And I can tell you the answer now because I'm a prophet.
Of course, of course, of
Of
course.
course, just to pile on everything else.
Mhm.
Through these statements and many other statements that he made, he succeeded in making them believe that all he said was true and he was the only one that they could trust because he was the chosen one by God.
Of course.
Yeah. The people had no reason to doubt that what he was telling them was anything but the truth, and he provided them with anything they needed, and he was like a father to them. So,
Okay.
blind trust.
Yes, absolutely.
Uh, so once they're in Guyana, and shortly after Jonestown was established, things began looking up. The members' quality of life had improved living amongst a more accepting community. So some members even began to break through their drug habits. However, the brainwashing and the abuse increased.
Yeah.
No one could leave Jonestown, and no one could even speak about wanting to leave because it was forbidden. There were, in order to ensure people never left, there were guards armed with guns lining the property of Jonestown. So if you tried to leave, you quickly were deterred against it.
Do you know, and I don't know if you know this, I don't know if anybody would know this, if prior to the mass suicide, if anybody was shot trying to leave?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I have no idea. I don't
I
think
don't
I honestly feel like it was more of a scare tactic and that they wouldn't actually kill one of their members that way.
Yeah, you'd hope.
Yeah, so I think it was more of just a scare tactic. Because I know
Gotcha.
people did try to leave, but
Mhm.
um, to gain further control over everyone there, he ensured the people did not have a chance to process what was happening. So they were required to work longer days. They were given terrible food. And the only news that they heard came from Jones on a loudspeaker, which amplified throughout the whole settlement.
And didn't that play, like, 24/7?
Yes, it did.
Yeah, that would drive you insane
Yeah.
as well.
Especially because you're trying to sleep.
Yeah,
So, yes, no, but it was like 24/7.
yeah.
To provide insight into how deprived they were, we must look at the typical day of someone living in Jonestown. Okay.
Perfect.
6 a.m., you wake up.
Ooh,
You eat
already hate
breakfast.
it.
Yeah, you eat breakfast. 7 a.m., you report to the work field. Half an hour break for lunch. And then at 6 p.m., the workday ended.
Ugh,
11 hours working
that's insane, and that's every day, like, they didn't have weekends.
every day.
Yeah.
Um, 7 p.m. you had dinner. 9 p.m. you had Russian class.
Okay.
I think it's in case of the nuclear war, they could go to Russia.
Okay.
And then 11 p.m. you go to sleep, or complaints are dealt with until about 2 or 3 a.m.
Ooh.
So you get up at 6 a.m. and you either go to bed at 11 p.m. or 3 a.m. and then have to wake up at 6 a.m. again.
I would be a horrible monster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, Cody works, so he does shift work, right? So he
Yeah.
works 12-hour days, but
Yeah.
he works, like, 4 days and then has, like, 4 or 5 days off.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awful. It's terrible. And then on top of that, they were getting like really bad food and stuff and just like
Yeah.
having his loudspeaker on all the time. So,
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's, like, the number one tactic of cults is sleep and food deprivation.
yep. Um, and here we go. The next slide. This is a major tool of abuse for the purpose of brainwashing.
Oops, sorry. Always jumping the gun on you.
That's okay. I jumped the gun on you in the earlier story. So, if people are unable to get the sleep or nutrition they require, then they're unable to form opinions about anything being wrong because all the thinking was done for them.
Yeah.
You literally have no time to think or
Right.
energy.
Right. You're just tired.
Yeah. Jones was even successful in making families turn against each other. He was paranoid about someone wanting to leave, so he ensured everyone was aware that they were required to inform him if they heard of anyone wanting to leave. The penalty if they did not inform on these people was very severe, as they were beaten and humiliated publicly.
Wow.
No one was safe from anyone regarding stating their opinion and concern on the state of Jonestown. And a former member by the name of Odell Rhodes, he was a survivor, and he stated in an interview, in rare moments of privacy, one resident might express negative opinions to another, and that was very unwise to reply with anything but criticism of such ideas because the person might be an informer.
Oh. So not only are you sleep deprived, food deprived, but now you're paranoid that everyone's against you.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. It was super unclear who could be trusted because anyone could be an informer for Jones, and this left the people in a state of submissive fear.
Yeah.
After some time, Jones lost his path towards doing good for the world, obviously. And as his power and control over everyone grew, he began to lose control of himself and became more and more cruel. The three cruelest punishments Jones had concocted and inflicted on his people are as follows. First one was the well. So people were hung, usually children,
Oh my
upside
gosh.
upside down by their feet. They were then dunked in water repeatedly and then they were scared or grabbed by an individual who was lurking in the water.
Oh my gosh, that's terrifying for a little kid.
Yeah. And then we have the box. So someone would be placed in a scorching hot box, which was dark and underground.
Oh.
And finally, we have drugs,
Oh, okay.
where if the two above methods of torture didn't work, the individual was brought to the medical tent for drug induced behavior modification.
I'd want that over the other two.
Uh, it was, I think it was, I don't know.
It
I,
wasn't fun drugs.
no, no. Jones became obsessed with the power and control he had over the people, and he was willing to do whatever it took to keep that control. He knew he could not let them believe that they had a choice in anything that happened to them. So Jones ensured they knew their place in the community, and they knew that if they did anything aside from what he told them to do, then they would pay for their disobedience.
Gotcha.
He instilled fear in the minds of everyone living in Jonestown. They were his and no one else's. They were his children.
Mhm.
Considering the tactics used and Jones's strong grasp on everybody, it's really easy to understand why things ended up the way that they did for the people of Jonestown.
Yeah, for sure.
So, that's my first part.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Part 1.
Part 1, the juicy, gritty potatoes. Part 2 is not gonna be as long, but it's, like, the final night and everything, and
Yeah. And
it's
for those of you that don't know, it doesn't end well.
no. But please listen to the next episode because it is very fascinating.
Super fascinating. There's a politician involved, it gets crazy.
Yeah, it's wild. It's a wild, wild ride, so
Yeah.
tune in for part 2.
And if in the meantime you would like more of us lovely ladies, you can find
Yeah.
us on social media at histories or Facebook and Instagram, Histories and Mysteries, or you can email us at historiesandmysteries515@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have a great week and tune in next week for part 2 of Jonestown. And I will be talking about another true crime case.
Have a great week, everybody.
Bye.